Well, in a trial that has been viewed all over the world, there was a bombshell moment in the trial this week. That's right, we're talking about the Murdaugh murder trial. We're going to be talking about that along with that bombshell moment on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. Well, it's what some people are calling, they're calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
Of individuals interviewed and participating in this show and do not represent those of Peacemaker Network and Charlie Crimebuster. All individuals described or mentioned in the podcast should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This podcast contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Charlie Crimebuster. Really glad to have you around the Charlie Crimebuster crime train today. Glad to have you on board as we continue to talk about the Murdaugh murders. Boy, it's all been all over the news and actually been followed on court TV. So today on this episode, we're going to talk about the bombshell that hit. But before we do that, let me again say welcome to the program, especially to new listeners. We always love to have new listeners. We have them every single week. And hey, I want you to know also, those of you who every week turn on to this particular podcast and you listen to it, either on your car radio as you feed it through the system while you're going to work, or maybe in your favorite podcast listening platform, we appreciate it. We thank you for being a part of our crime family. Hey, we always want to encourage you, if you want to reach out with a shout out, you can reach me, charliecrimebuster at gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster at gmail.com. Send me an email. You can ask questions, you can give suggestions, you can even offer differences of opinion. We love that. And we will try to get back to each and every one of you. And we want you to know that you are a part of our crime family. And by the way, if you'd like to support the program, so many people want to say, hey, is there some way I can help? Then you can go to peacemakernetwork.com. That's peacemakernetwork.com. You become a badge, B-A-D-G-E, badge supporter. You do that for as little as $3 a month. You can become a part of the family. And you can also help us help others, because through the peacemakernetwork.com platform, we're able to help the policemen, the firemen, those first responders who come out and run toward danger instead of away from danger. And we also support the military. So if you'd like to be a part of that, go on over to peacemakernetwork.com. There you'll find all about how you can be a part of helping others. Hey, how you can be a part of a solution instead of a part of a problem. Again, that's peacemakernetwork.com. Reach me, Charlie Crimebuster, at gmail.com. Well, what has been dubbed as another one of those trial of the century moments, at least for a small South Carolina county, they received a bombshell. That's right, a bombshell. In fact, you could say there was a collective grasp from the audience, from those who are in the courtroom, whenever, get this, the defense called their own client, disgraced, disbarred, Alex Murdaugh. They called him to the stand to testify. Now, you see, most lawyers never want their defendant to take the stand. But ultimately, it's up to the client, him or herself, if they want to do it. Lots of times, the defendant, they think they can just get up there and tell their side of the story, and the jury's going to bite hook, line, and sinker. And most of the time, they're wrong. But what about this time? Did his testimony help him, or did his testimony hinder him? We're going to talk about what he actually said on the stand in the moment, but right now it's time for what we call our Crazy Crook Story of the Day. We share that every week to kind of lighten the load. Well, as we well know, there are break-ins every day in this country. Now, if you've been a victim of a break-in, especially in your home, you must know how violated you feel. In fact, there is a break-in, according to statistics, every 2.6 seconds. Did you get that? Every 2.6 seconds, there's a break-in. Well, this particular break-in, it happened at a mini-mart, which, by the way, these type of stores have often been a favorite target of a whole lot of criminals. Well, this criminal, he was not so smart. First, he tried to break in wasn't successful. The police were called. They almost nabbed him. He took off. They chased him. They stumbled over themselves, and he must have been a pretty good runner because he was able to evade the police. However, while he might have been a good runner, he was a not-so-smart runner. You see, for a while he escaped, but the place he escaped to, well, he sought refuge on the grounds of a large building to hide in. And little did he know, the place? Well, it's called Sing Sing. Yep, Sing Sing. And Sing Sing, well, it's a maximum security prison up there in New York. And it did not take but just for a moment for a guard to catch him. Well, at least I guess we could say he was trying to save the po-po some travel time. You see, they would not have to travel far to put him in prison. Wish it was that simple, don't you? But nowadays, places where they're soft on crime, that guy would not serve any time in jail. But this man who attempted to elude the police by hiding in a prison, yep, sirree, he is Charlie Crimebuster's crazy crook story of the week. Time phone, or his phone, and the timestamp again, it was 8:44 p.m. Well, now he gets on the stand. He says, I got to tell you about that. He said it was his voice in the video. It was recorded out by the kennels. Then he goes on to explain why he deceived prosecutors about where he was on that night. He says it was his long-time opiate use, his drug use, had made him paranoid after he had found his wife and his son. And his law partners, well, they advised him not to say a word unto Danny Henderson, that's Murdaugh's fellow law partner. He said, don't you say anything about this. That's what they were saying to him until the attorney got there. That was the one who served as his counsel during his first interview with the investigators. That was Danny Henderson. So his friends and people from the law firm said, be quiet, don't say anything till Danny gets there. And there at that point, even his hands was tested for gunshot residue. That's what Murdaugh said as he continued on the stand. And he said he was being questioned by officers from SLED, that's the State Law Enforcement Division. And he said all those things coming together, and after finding them, well, that was my distrust of SLED. Well, it caused me to have paranoid thoughts. He said I wasn't thinking clearly. He said I don't think I was capable of reason, so that's why I lied and said I wasn't down there by the kennels. But then he kind of added a little color to that testimony, you see. He said on the stand, oh, what a tangled web we weave. That's what he replied as the attorney pressed him about why he lied multiple times about where he was. He said, once I told a lie, well, I told my family I just had to keep on lying. So from his lips to the jury, he said, I really did lie about being down there, but even though I was down there, I left before they were killed. So what was he doing when his wife and his son was killed? Well, here's what he says. Tells us all about that day on June the 7th, that terrible day when Maddie and Paul were killed. He said he left for work that morning while Maggie was going to a doctor's appointment there in Charleston. And he said she had planned to spend the night at their other house there in Edisto Beach. But Murdaugh said he told Maggie he'd like for her to come back there home to spend the evening with him. Said he always preferred it that way. And when he returned that evening, he said, well, he and Paul, his son, well, they got out and just kind of drove around on the property, just the two of them. See, it is a huge plot of property. Remember I shared with you last week about that. 1,800 acres. And he and his son that day were just driving around one of the three-wheelers or ATVs or something like that. You see, Paul's former girlfriend, well, she called that whole area a big play area for Paul and his teenage friends. They'd get out there and hunt, fish, ride three-wheelers. And, the family had golf carts and ATVs to travel all over that 1,800-acre property. And he went on to talk about his time with Paul that day, kind of, giving Paul a fuzzy nickname. You see, he described it this way. He said you could not, and this I'm quoting him, you could not be around Paw. See, they called Paul Paw and not have a good time. He said you couldn't be around him without having a good time. And while he's saying this, he's fighting tears. He said, I love to do anything with Pawpaw. He was an absolute delight. Then he goes on to say that his wife Maggie, well, she got back sometime after 8 o'clock that night. And he said he left Paul down by the kennels and he went back to the main house, talked to his wife for a bit, then took a shower. After that, he said he put on green shorts and a white t-shirt. That's what investigators saw him later on that night. He just also testified that they did have, dinner together while watching TV in the den. And then he said at some point, well, Paul left the room. Maggie, then she said she was going down to the kennels. A few minutes after that, she left. Then he thought he would join them, saying he had seen, the evidence that indicated that Paul and Maggie had driven to the kennels together. He said he didn't know that Paul was down there at the time, so he took the golf cart over, and he said when he got there, well, there was all kinds of things going on. Called it chaos. Seems that their dog Bubba had caught a chicken. He said, well, he diffused that situation. Then he said he chatted with Maggie a little bit, and Paul was actually tending to a friend's dog, Cash. He got that out there. Then Murdaugh said after he chatted with him a little bit, then he went back to the house and he laid down on the couch in the den. This would have been about the time that prosecutors have indicated the murder. So he said, well, I was down there, but I left. I went back and took a nap, and that's when the murders took place. He said when he got up from his nap, he decided he wanted to visit his mother. You see, she lives about 10 miles away, and she has Alzheimer's. So let me summarize it. According to Alex, they had dinner together. Paul left, then Maggie went to the kennels, and Paul was down there. He joins them. One of the dogs caught a chicken. He comes to the rescue, I guess helps secure the chicken from the dog. And then he chats with Maggie for a moment, and then he goes back to the house, takes a nap. Only then he gets up to go see his sick mom. That's it. That's what he said happened. You see, it's a pretty slick way to defend his lie when he told the police that he was not down at the kennels prior to the murders. But I guess the question is, do you buy this? Do you buy this that he was just, he had drug problems, he was afraid he was a suspect, and he told them he wasn't at the kennels, but now he's telling the truth that he was down there, but he left? What does this say to the jury? Are they going to say, well, I could understand that he didn't want to say that he was down there at the kennels? Or could they say that this guy lies about everything and he did it? So he goes on to talk about how he went to his mother's house, said the door was locked, so he called his mom's caretaker to let him in. He said he talked to his mom for just a little while and made sure she was okay. And as he left, he tried texting Maggie. Said he did it twice, let her know he was on the way back. But he said up there in Moselle, the cell service was spotty, so he wasn't really concerned that he didn't hear right back. Now, on this trip to his mom's house, the prosecutors are alleging that he was hiding evidence. Remember that 1 minute? They said, well, they think during that 1 minute in the driveway, he got out and hid evidence. But our defendant, has a different story about that. When he was asked by his lawyer, Griffin, when he was asked what was happening during that minute, well, they knew that he stopped there that minute because they got data from the vehicle, the Chevy Suburban there. We got that evidence out of the computer of the car. He says that he was stopped in his mother's driveway because he had dropped his phone and he was fishing around for it before he drove off. Now, we've all done that, haven't we? Dropped your phone, pulled over the side of the road, try to find it. I hope you pulled over the side of the road, didn't drive while you were doing that. That's what he said that happened. You see, according to Murdaugh, he was not busily stashing weapons or disposing of bloody clothes, as the prosecution had just suggested. So then he's been there, he's on the way back, and now his lawyers say, well, what happened when he found his wife and his son, who had been shot multiple times? Well, at this time, he breaks down on the stand. He sobs as he describes finding Maggie and Paul, who were shot multiple times. He said when he got back there to Moselle, he went back to the main house. After a few minutes, he said he drove his car back down to the kennels, found his wife and his son, and he said what he saw was so bad, and he said that between tears. He said, I just went back and forth between them while talking to 911. Now, according to the records, that call was made at 10:06 p.m. Now, parts of the call were replayed, including Murdaugh saying, quote, "I should have known, I should have known." And so the attorneys asked him, "What did you mean by that I should have known?" And Paul said that he was talking about the threats that Paul had received since Paul was involved in a 2019 boat crash. Remember, that crash left one of the passengers, 19-year-old Mallory Beach, dead. Paul now is being accused of being drunk behind the wheel of the boat. He had pleaded not guilty, and he was waiting for those charges to be heard in court when he was killed. Now, at some point, Murdaugh testified he just didn't know who it might be that was on his property, but he thought it was somebody that was after Paul because Paul was involved in that drunk boating accident. And so he went back to the main house. He grabbed the first gun he saw. He grabbed a 12-gauge shotgun lying there on the pool table. Got a few shells, get this, including some shells that really wasn't made for that firearm. So the question is, as he went back there and got that gun and ran back down there, is he so shook up because he thinks someone's still out there to kill him? Or is he just shook up thinking about ways to cover up his own crime? He goes on to say about getting the shotgun and a different type of ammo. He said, "That's not a mistake I would have made under any circumstances other than that night." So now we're here at the part where he sees the bodies. He runs up the house, he grabs a gun and the wrong ammo, and next he explains about something else the prosecution brought out. They are alleging that while he was waiting on the police, that he was actually reading text messages, and that he was Googling a restaurant while waiting for the police to come to the crime scene. Well, on the stand, Murdaugh, he just denied that. He said, "I wasn't reading through my text messages while waiting for responders to show up. Never Googled a restaurant after an officer had arrived." He said what he did do is he called his brothers, Randy, and John Marvin, as well as a close family friend, Rogan Gibson. And he goes on to say that Murdaugh said he did maybe get blood on his fingertips from touching the bodies. But here, my friend, is another problem for the prosecution. And they introduced this problem for the prosecution while Alex was on the stand. They asked him about a forensic report that stated that he had high-velocity blood splatter on his shirt. But now get this. The prosecution did not enter that into evidence at this trial. Because, my friend, back during the pretrial motions, well, the defense pretty well tore up the credibility of that report in their motions. So Murdaugh, he wanted to bring this out, the defense wanted to bring this out again, that they'd already blotched it about that blood splatter. And he went on to say there was no way for splatter to have got on his shirt because he was nowhere near Maggie and Paul when they were shot. And unfortunately, the prosecution has nothing to refute that fact. The fact that there was no such splatter on his clothes that evening. So now he's going over his day with the murders on the stand, and then he says that after that day, after that terrible day, after the police came, that he and his eldest son, Buster, 26 years of age, said they went and spent the night nearby, and then he came back to Moselle first thing the next morning. So while he was on the stand, he was also talked to by his attorneys or asked questions about this entire investigation. And to say that the investigators were not really top-notch on the scene about this crime, well, that would be an understatement. You see, when he returned to the scene on June the 8th, he said he told the investigators to search anything, anywhere, anytime. He also told them on multiple times they should look at the GPS data on his car and Maggie's cell phones. He told them that because he said the two phones never crossed paths during the time in question. He went on to talk about the fact that his wife loved the Find My Friends feature on the phone, so he knew she'd have a location tracking enabled. He also testified that he pretty well knew he'd be considered a suspect at first because he was the one that found the bodies. So he wanted that data to exonerate him. But now get this. Unfortunately, by the time investigators looked into that particular bit of phone activity, well, that data had been overwritten. Now, text messages, deleted Google searches, other records were recovered, but the data that he was talking about that could have, quote unquote, exonerated him, he said had already been overwritten. That was the fact of it. Then he went on to say that he knew that after August 11th, there was an interview there with Agent David Owen. He said that that's when he saw the video from Paul's phone placing him at the house. He knew then he'd be a prime suspect for the murder. Then, of course, we talk about those financial things. Now, much has been said, probably too much, about all those financial matters. Some are even thinking that maybe, just maybe, it was kind of clouding the real evidence of the murder. So, he began to talk about his guilt or innocence there about those financial deals. Now, the prosecution is alleging that this is the motive, that Murdaugh killed Maggie and Paul as evidence of his financial misdeeds was piling up on him. So, defense attorney Griffin, he came right out and asked Alex. He said, "Were you rattled on June the 7th from a discussion you had that with the law firm's chief financial officer?" You see, she had asked Murdaugh about $792,000 in fees that were allegedly missing from client's account. Well, Murdaugh, he says, he was somewhat concerned. He knew he'd have to answer for the missing money at some point, but he said he did not consider it an emergency. And he said not only did he not commit the murders because of this, as his lawyer put it, the financial cards was coming down, he testified rather that his wife's death had made it even harder for him to tap into their homes that they had, several of them, for financing because the name was attached to both properties. He said there was no way that he would want to murder them to get out from under that because that was his real escape to get out from under it. Now, under cross-examination, Murdaugh said he believed that that financial officer thought he had given her a dirty look when he confronted him. And she described that while testifying for the prosecution. But in his view, he said it certainly didn't seem like even a confrontation. Said that her manner in coming to him was that it was almost apologetic. And he also said he wasn't really particularly worried about a hearing that had been scheduled on June the 10th relating to a pending lawsuit. Now, that goes back to that boat crash. He said he was not, as prosecutors alleged, terrified that he'd have to turn over all of his financial records. He says as an attorney himself, he knew that order would be highly unlikely. He also said that he was already preparing his network statement detailing his assets and liabilities on the day of the murders. But he did come right out and say, I am guilty of one thing. I did steal money from my clients that was supposed to go to them. He said, yes, I did. He said, I'm not quite sure how I let myself get to where I got. But he said he actually spent a huge amount of money over 2 decades to fund his drug addiction. He said he was becoming increasingly dependent on Oxycontin. That was after surgeries to repair an old college football knee injury. He'd actually checked into inpatient rehab 3 times over the years. First 2 didn't take. But now he said he's been sober since September the 21st trip to rehab. That was just after the killings and his resignation from his law firm. So where is the truth at in this? Upon cross-examination, the prosecutor said he planned to go through every incident of client theft of Murdaugh. Now, my answer to this again, why? Why are you going to keep going to those financial things? This jury is trying to find out whether he's guilty of killing his wife and his son. So he comes back on that. He says, I shouldn't have done it. I hate the fact that I did it. I'm embarrassed about it. I'm embarrassed for my son, embarrassed for my family. I don't dispute that I did it, again, in reference to stealing this money. Well, he said there was a lot of conversations he had where he misled his clients. There's all kinds of things that you do, to be able to look yourself in the mirror. You lie to yourself. I guess self-justification for these bad things. But again, my friend, I want to point out that this is, again, back to that money thing and not really dealing directly with the evidence as far as what happened on that day. Well, what with the jury? The jury can go either way on this one. You can give it reasons for the jury actually to disagree. Let's talk about a little bit of the strengths and the weaknesses of the prosecution before we leave today. The first one, I guess, is that they had this question about what he said in an interview with a South Carolina law enforcement agent. there's a lot of going back and forth whether he said they did him so bad or I did him so bad. Well, one heard one thing and one heard the other. And the jury can really go either way on that one. But it does give reason, again, for the jury to divide itself. And next there is that controversial blue raincoat that was found there in the house, his mom's house. It had GSR on it, but no DNA, no blood. The only thing tying it directly to Murdaugh is the one often inconsistent and nervously inarticulate witness. And remember, GSR, that's gunshot residue, it can stay around for a long time. And if he had that raincoat on, you would expect there would be blood and DNA on it, and there were not any there. Now, other DNA evidence, well, that's mostly useless. At the family's home, everybody's DNA could be found everywhere. And again, as far as that GSR, well, he was either smart or telling the truth, because you see, the small levels of GSR that was found on Murdaugh, well, that was consistent with him running up there and getting that family shotgun for protection. And next, there's the clothing. Despite heavy testing, it was revealed that the possible blood splatter that was found on it, now get this, it wasn't even human blood. It wasn't not human blood. And then, of course, the crime scene preservation. Wow. The defense has criticized law enforcement for not properly securing the crime scene. They did not search things. There are no key fingerprints, footprints, tire marks. All that, you see, is useless because they waited so long, weeks and weeks and weeks after, before they even tied down the murder scene. Well, you see, even the water they found on the ground near the crime scene said that might have washed stuff away. Well, all of this, my friend, is just not good for the prosecution. And they did seize multiple weapons. Lots of weapons. Problem is, none of them were the murder weapons. So the state, after throwing 59 witnesses, get that, 59 witnesses, over 400 pieces of evidence, what does the state really have to really hang their hat on? Well, there's a couple things. There is that data and those things that they're saying that he was at the crime scene when he said he wasn't. He tried to explain that away. I don't know whether he did or not. Only the jury knows that. And then the fact is that the ammunition, the firearms and ballistics experts, they said that the fired 300 blackout rounds found near Maggie's body, that they were cycled through the same rifle that fired rounds at the family's home and shooting range, meaning that she was killed with a family weapon. Well, the spent rifle cartridges, as well as the 12-gauge shotgun shells, well, they were also the same type and manufactured brands as one that was found in the Murdaugh home in the outbuildings. But again, those same brands could be found in a number of places. You see, Murdaugh, he claims that his son's rifle was lost or stolen around Christmas of 2020. Yet there was a witness recalled shooting it with Paul just 3 weeks prior to those killings. Now, next, according to some, you see, Maggie Murdaugh, she wanted to spend the Monday night at her favorite place in the world. That's her beach house. But Alex, he wanted her to come home, reportedly to visit his ailing parents. He also asked Paul to come home, as well as to help him work on the farm. The question is, did he really need them home to support him, or was it a way to lure them to their death? Well, the state thinks so, but what say ye? That's the bottom line to all of this, you see. Alex Murdaugh, no doubt, he's been proven to be a liar, but being a liar doesn't mean that you're a murderer. But is there enough real evidence to bring him to the scene? What think you? You see, this is going to be going to the jury soon, and we're going to have a verdict pretty soon now. What do you think the jury is going to say? You see, if just one person holds out, it can be a hung jury. If more than one person holds out, it could actually go back to another trial. But what about you? What do you think? We'd love to hear from you. You can reach me at charliecrimebuster@gmail.com, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Tell me what you think this jury is going to come back with. Guilty, innocent, hung jury? Well, I don't think they're going to say innocent. They may not say guilty, maybe a hung jury, but I doubt seriously it's innocent. I'd put my money that they won't come back and say that. Anyway, that's to be determined, but what you and I can determine right now is we can determine to watch out for ourselves. You see, that's why you have to stay alert. And we always say here at Charlie Crimebuster, as we close out the program, we're going to say it right now. Whatever you do, my friend, be safe, be alert, for, yep, the life you save, it may be your very own.